Hello, everybody. I'm Manuel. This is joint work with Xiang, who is over there. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here in this presentation is I'm not gonna give you the paper, okay? But I'm gonna give you the spirit of the paper. So there are a lot of technical details that I'm gonna be glancing over here a little bit. But both Xiang and myself, we're very happy to engage with you at the end when you ask the questions, but also over the 2 days. Okay, good. Let me start with the question. Why are you guys here? It's not the food, okay? No. I think better. But like, why are you here? Okay, so I include myself. Why am I here? What's the title of the conference? DeFi is in it, right? So presumably, we are here because we believe in the potential of DeFi to change the world, right? And what change the world? Maybe in the potential of DeFi to replace TradFi, right? That's the idea. So how big is that? How big is that opportunity? It's big, yeah? So I'm a serious, but I teach macroeconomics at the ESE, so which means I'm familiar with GDP now. I wasn't before, but now I am. So GDP, remember, it's the market value of final goods and services produced, right? So GDP projection for this year is 113 trillion. How much is financial services? Depending whom you ask, it's between 30 and 25%, okay? So that comes out to max 28 trillion. But that's 28 trillion market value of goods, financial services delivered. I'm not talking about trading volume or anything. What does this mean? It means we haven't even started, okay? DeFi hasn't even started when you put it in this context and say we are going to take over from the banks. We get rid of BlackRock, yeah? We are baby, not even. We are still in the belly. Okay, good. So, fine. Remember, DeFi decentralized, right? So the idea is we're gonna take it from them because we're better. Because we are permissionless, we're decentralized, all of these things. Okay, good. But now, you want to take over from TradFi, right? Means you have to integrate with the world. You have these smart contracts that you're going to be executing on chain, they have to execute partially based on real world data, which does not live on chain. So we need to get it on chain, right? And who does that? Oracle. So the whole point of this slide was to say, DeFi is big, potential is big, oracles are very important. Yeah, that's the point. Okay, good. So what do we do? So we looked at the literature, and then it became clear to us that the existing oracle mechanism, either explicitly or implicitly, they were built with an underlying assumption, which is that the state of the world, so remember, so these contracts execute on some state that is reported by the oracle, right? Think a prediction market, a betting market, who won the election, Trump or Hillary, it was before, what's it called, Kamala, right? Also H for Harris. Who won? Well, okay, we have an oracle reported. So the implicit assumption that the guys that wrote these mechanisms that I actually used is the state is commonly known. The oracle reporting agent commonly know who won the election. What does common knowledge mean? It means they all know who won the election. They all know that they all know the winner. They all know that they all know that they all know ad infinitum, okay? Which means that's a very stringent requirement. It's actually very hard to come up with something that is common. So good. We realized that, and then we said, fine. What if it's not commonly known? Yeah, but it's not commonly known, but we are close to common knowledge. Can we still implement the true state? Can these mechanisms still implement the true state or not? Which would be bad news, right? And in crypto, you'd like to think about attacks. So that's a new attack vector, like which we call obfuscation attack. What do you do as an attacker, malicious party? What you do is you just create some infinitesimal doubt among the reporting state, and not about the first order of knowledge, but about the higher ones, right? That I'm not sure if the other guys all know that the other guys all know, etc. Yeah? So meaning you can think about in terms of attack possibility. So what do we show? And again, so we show a bunch of stuff. I'm going to give you a gist here for the presentation. And it's also still ongoing. There's more stuff to be included. First, we show that very generally, if you want to be able to implement a true state in a neighborhood of common knowledge, you need to have an Oracle native token. So you cannot have, we are staking in I don't know, stablecoin or ETH, and we're providing incentive payments. Doesn't work. Okay. Okay, fine. So now let's say we have an Oracle native token for the mechanism. What do we show then? That standard, very general class of mechanisms, you have a trade-off. And the trade-off is the following. Either you are going to be robust, you're still going to implement the truth in the neighborhood of common knowledge, but if you do, you're not decentralized. So remember, DeFi, decentralized, very important. So that's a problem as well. So the only way to solve it is to centralize the reporting. But the good news is we also have a solution. So we're looking at the larger class of mechanisms, then we show there's a very simple sequential mechanism where the reporting agents report sequentially, observing the reports of them that went before them, and you solve everything. So you're going to be decentralized, you're going to be fully decentralized, but you're also going to be robust to this kind of obfuscation attacks. You're still going to robustly implement the true state in a neighborhood of common knowledge. When did I start?
6.5 minutes ago.
Okay, so I have to speed up. Okay, so good. So let me give you a little bit detail of the model. Yeah. So we're going to say there's a finite set of agents. These are the Oracle agents that report to the mechanism. And here, for the sake of this, there's a finite state space. Yeah. And the example I want you to think about is the one that I already mentioned, with who won the election, who will win the championship. Okay. And now, a simultaneous Oracle mechanism is described by the following elements. So you have a message space. Okay, so each of the reporting agents has a set of messages he can send. And we're looking at generalized direct mechanism, which means the true state is part of the messages that you can send, but it can be much richer than that. Okay, so then you have an implementation function that takes the profile of messages and implements possibly a lottery over the realized state. So we allow for randomization, both in implemented state as well as in the payments. And then you have a payment function which takes the profile of messages, and conditional on the profile of messages, you have a lottery over payments. Okay, and simultaneous means when I'm one of the guys that report, when I report, I do not know I didn't observe your report, but you can think of, yeah, simultaneous. We do it at the same time. Okay, good. This seems, so we are academics, yeah? So do I know everything that's happening on chain? No, but luckily there's some sources, okay? So Chainlink, which is by market cap the largest Oracle, right? When you look at their 2.0 paper, I know that I just learned that they published a new one last month, but when you look there, this is actually how they're thinking about it as well. You look at the last sentence here. In each round, nodes first commit to their report, and once all have committed, they reveal, which means it's equivalent to what they said. It's like you can think of it as simultaneous report. Yeah, so meaning the class, so if you follow Chainlink, then the class of what's going on is well represented by this class of mechanisms that I described. And also note one thing I should say something here. So this payment function is very general. So it allows you for staking, incentive payments, slashing. You can cover it with this payment function. Okay. Good. So now we have to think about the payment. When you think about incentive payments, or this, you can think of payments or staking, in which this function B is denominated in. It could be a lot of things, right? It could be stablecoins. It could be some L1 token, or it could be an Oracle native token. So what we're going to say is this payment coin is going to be implementation invariant if the price does not vary in the relationship between the true state and the state that is implemented. Okay? So it doesn't matter for the price of it. So example, stablecoin. The idea of the stablecoin is fixed. It doesn't change, right? So it's not going to matter for the price of the stablecoin if Chainlink reports a true state or not. Yeah? And we're going to say there's positive implementation impact if the price does vary with the relationship between the true state and the implemented state. Okay, so in particular, you are reporting the wrong state, you will suffer. The price will suffer relative to the counterfactual. So now, what do we assume in terms of agents? So we're not in the CS environment where you have the honest agent and malicious agents, but rather we are in the game theory environment where people respond to incentives. Okay, so what we're going to assume is that they have monotone preferences in the fiat payments. So you have the payment in the token, and then you convert it into its fiat price. That's why the price of the token matters. Okay, information. So when you don't have common knowledge, you're not in a complete information environment, you have to, you have to think, what is my belief over the state, right? What are my beliefs over Hillary or Harris and Trump? But given that my payoff don't only depend on my own report, but also on the reports of others, I have to also think, what are the beliefs of the others? Okay, and then I have to form beliefs over that, and you get a full hierarchy of beliefs of probability distribution. So luckily, there's a simple way or a nice way to represent it, which is via type space. Okay, so here we follow the standard approach in game theory. And then once you have all of that, you can define a game of incomplete information. And then we're going to say that an equilibrium of this game is continuous if for type profiles that represent or encapsulate information close to common knowledge, the implemented state is close to the one that is implemented complete information, particularly obviously we're interested one in the truth, okay? And what is the objective? The objective is to design an oracle mechanism that satisfies what we call strong continuous implementation, where all continuous equilibria implement the truth state. Okay? All continuous equilibria implement the truth state. So here, note there's a lot of detail here, okay? And that I'm not going into now. But the word strong here is important. So we have kind of a full implementation notion that you require this to be true in all equilibria. And then when you look at the literature, it's more about continuous implementation, partial implementation notion, where you just require one continuous equilibrium that has this property. However, as we show in the paper, that doesn't work in the oracle context because there are very undesirable mechanisms that would satisfy this property, so you need to strengthen. And so if you're interested, and there's a lot to be said about this after the talk, okay? Good, let's get to the result. First result, if the oracle payment coordinates implementation is invariant, then every simultaneous oracle mechanism fails from continuous implementation, okay? So you need this variation in the fiat price of the token that depends on do we implement the truth or not. In order to get, I speak very informally now, but in order to provide strict incentives for truth telling, which means payments in fiat, payments in stablecoin, payment in Solana, etc. It's not going to work. Okay. So there's more analysis of simultaneous mechanisms. So good, bad news. There's a very simple mechanism that satisfies strong continuous implementation, and it works as follows. I just pick one of the guys as a dictator. I ignore everybody else, and I just implement what this guy wants. Beautiful, it works. Why? Because then higher order beliefs don't matter. It's just his first order beliefs that matter, right? What's the problem? Well, it's fully decentralized. And remember, DeFi, decentralized, right? So that's all we want. And, well, that was good and bad news. Then there's the bad news. Within this class of, okay, that comes first. So when you look at what are the mechanisms, oracle mechanism on chain, right? They have two of, so me as a non-expert, they have one of two forms. Either it's a median, right, of some version of the median when you think about history, right? Or it's some weighted majority / plurality. So these mechanisms, they have the property that if you wanted to satisfy strong continuous implementation, it only works if they're dictatorial. If I just take one guy's report, ignore everybody else, which is very undesirable, right? Okay, so now let's go richer. Let's allow for randomization. So these results were for deterministic mechanism, right? So now let's allow for, again, we're simultaneous, but now we randomize. And then we're going to say that the message profile is subject to single deviation if there exists a single agent and the corresponding message such that this agent can change the implemented state. Okay, so you can see, oh, there's some guy that has veto power. Yeah, if the message profile satisfies this for the given mechanism, then somebody has veto power. And then what we're showing is, okay, take the class of simultaneous mechanism, allow for randomization. Now, if you have a mechanism that satisfies strong continuous implementation, then any complete information, so forget about deviations around common knowledge, look only at complete information, every single such equilibrium will be subject to single deviation. Which means that's a problem because this is the trade-off that I was talking about, right? So either you satisfy strong continuous, you're robust to perturbations, or in this case, you have the single deviation problem. Good. So now the beautiful is a simple solution. Okay, what's a simple solution? It's a direct mechanism, meaning the set of messages is just the states. And here, for example, I just take the binary case. Okay, and the mechanism is simply they vote in a strict sequential order, observing the votes of those that came before them. And then in a binary case, they have weights. Okay, everybody has a weight. And then you implement the state that has higher sum of weights that voted for it. Okay? And the payment function is, if I voted for the state that ends up being in a majority, being implemented, then I get a payment of 1. And if I don't, I get a payment of 0. Yeah? And there's a lot of detail here, but it turns out this sequential mechanism is going to satisfy what we call strong sequential continuous implementation, because you have to change implementation a little bit, because now people observe what people before them did, etc. So then some technical details there. But what is relevant for here is it works. So, and the mechanism is not subject to single deviation. Why? Because it's a majority. Right? So here, when you move to sequential, you can solve this dilemma, the trade-off between the two. How much?
4.5 minutes.
Awesome. Okay, let me end with some reflection rather than conclusions. So I'm not going to repeat what I said. Okay, but I'm going to say something new. Okay, suppose you're like, hey, let's launch an oracle. Okay, and then somebody says, hey, should we have a token, yes or no? And there are a couple of answers, right? When you think chronologically. Well, there's one answer that's not here, which is, suppose you have investors, right? Or yes, wait, how are we going to get rich if we don't issue a token, right? So then that's one reason why you're going to launch a token. But so I guess there's a lot of VC in the room, nobody's laughing. That's true. That's part of it. Okay, so what is the reason that people talk about? So they talked about, okay, we need it because for security, for bribery attacks. Right? That's going to help us protect against it. So awesome. So that's good. We have another answer, which is, okay, to protect against this obfuscation attacks, it's necessary to have a token, but not sufficient. You also have to be smart about the design of the mechanism. Okay? So then, second point, this challenge that I mentioned of implementing the true state in the neighborhood of common knowledge, it has nothing to do with bad guys that have a preference for always implementing Trump. Right? Or it has nothing to do with bribery payments. But because you could also think, well, I launch an oracle. How do I protect against the bad guys? Maybe let's do it in a permissioned way. Okay, I'm going to pick like my 5 friends, and we are going to do it, right? So what our result says, no, it's not going to work. Okay, and now it's the second time I quote from Chainlink, and I'm not doing that to be not nice to them simply because they have this information, right? So here they have this 2-tier mechanism, and then they say, look, when we're picking the guys in the second tier, then we're taking the longest serving, most reputable, etc., etc. It's not going to, it might work for the bribery stuff, but it's not going to work for this attack. Okay? And then finally, you could say, well, okay, fine. but is this a real problem? Or is this just the academics come in here and tell us something that we don't have to worry about? Yeah, and there are two answers. So first answer, actually nobody thinks about universal type space and doing the equilibrium here, right? But what we do is we reduce complexity. Likely what they would do is close to common knowledge, they would just treat it as common knowledge, okay? But then they're not fully rational, but that's possible. So you can think Bitcoin, you all know, right? You have the selfish mining paper, which says, the bit like Satoshi said, the honest mining is not in equilibrium, there's a profitable deviation. And it's actually, opposed to this, is so simple. Nevertheless, as far as I know, we haven't seen it. Okay, so then given that in the Bitcoin context it's so simple, then yeah, it's unlikely it's going to happen here. But, and somebody mentioned AI in the morning, right? So when you think that's fine now, when it's us being the Oracle reporting agent, but what in the future we're taking ChatGPT and I don't know, the AI guys are the reporting agent and they do fully understand how to do the equilibrium in this universal type space context, et cetera, right? Then that's the situation where it might become relevant, okay? Well, thank you.
I think we have time for one very quick question here before we take anything offline. See you over there.
Yeah, hi. Well, thank you. Really interesting. Do you have a definition or even a quantification of what constitutes close to common knowledge?
Okay, excellent. So I glanced. So look, there's huge literature on this. Okay, and in fact, the literature. So you can define a metric on these types, on these infinite hierarchies of belief. And there's a lot of ways you could do it, but there are kind of two. There's one very standard way, and then there's another way. And typically in the literature, the results that you get depend on the metric or on the topology. Okay? What is beautiful here is it's invariant in the topology. The results, they are not a function of what metric I pick on these infinite hierarchies, but they actually carry forward to any reasonable metric you can use.
All right, one last question, I think, down there.
Yeah, I can speak out. So you talk about the different agents having different knowledge and aggregating this knowledge, locking in the information when they but in the end they are the payoff depend on what everybody else votes on. So they don't care about having information similar to everybody else. They care about voting the same way that others vote. So if I believe that everybody else is going to vote on Trump or T, and no matter whether my private knowledge is H, I will want to vote for T. So how do you get in the end? It's a coordination game. So how do you exclude in the coordination game, we're going to have multiple equilibria. How do you exclude the non-truthful equilibria, given that we do not have a common knowledge of truth? So we don't have a grand truth based on which we can punish bad equilibrium.
Okay, so a lot of answers here. So first, we are not, only the positive result is a voting result. We're looking at general mechanism, right? So not only voting mechanism. That was it happens to be that there's a very simple sequential mechanism that was. But you raise a very good point. So, which is the multiplicity of equilibrium. But in the sequential, there's a unique subgame perfect equilibrium at complete information. We also show in the paper that there's a very nice random mechanism where it's a dominant, so there's a dominant strategy to report the truth. Okay, so, but just as a concluding comment, like what drives the negative results that we have is exactly the multiplicity of equilibria. Okay, that when you have a coordination game, then there's always it's going to be a weak equilibrium to just coordinate on what on one state independent of the state, and that's behind the negative results that we have. And remember, we have a strong we have this full implementation, right? We want it to be satisfied for all equilibria. Why? Because in this context you need to. If not, you're going to let mechanisms go through that you really don't want to go through. Okay?
Unfortunately, we're out of time for any more questions.